Howdy, you delicious people. I'm here today to review Invincible, episode 8. So, of course, this is to be the last episode of this season, and so really it does not disappoint. It kind of gets you in the feels, it kind of makes you go like, wow, this story is so interesting, and it's like we were so desperate to want this story to get out that finally in this episode we now have the reason. We now end up finding out why Omni-Man was doing what he was doing. Was he under control of somebody? Was Sinclair a wrongdoer and we didn't even realize all along? So on and so forth. And so, going into this show, man, just the carnage that goes on into this episode is amazing. That whole subway scene was just bananas. To see the visuals of just all of that being played out was just so worth it to watch this entire episode. But we just continue to see the carnage going along to where, like, it's pulling at our heartstrings consistently, and that's the thing that I thoroughly enjoyed about this episode. Going into here, like, man, was there a lot of just heartfelt moments where, like, we consistently have it be that we're just like, man, this story, like, really gets to you. And that's the thing that I thoroughly was like, whoa, like, you know what? Like, if you're a person that, like, wasn't thinking that any of the other episodes were a good enough payout for you and dot, man, this last episode just, like, really makes the investment of everything that were to have happened prior to this so much more worth it now to get to this pivotal point. So this episode has got to be hands down like the best episode, and it doesn't even have like a ton of characters consistently tied to it. It's mostly just between Invincible and Omni-Man, and then there is quite a few people that are just reacting, or we have Cecil doing his thing with his people. So, with that said, yeah, like, hands down, very good season. Very worthwhile. If you are a person that didn't watch any of these reviews and then just sat and watched this last review of my whole entire, showcasing of this entire season, this show was so worth watching. I thoroughly enjoyed it. An animated movie, live action or otherwise, I don't care about the differences or whatever. Like, to me, this was a show. To me, this was so worth watching, and because I've watched several shows where we just have kind of a goofy looking superhero that we just have to figure out, like, huh? Like, his design is kind of goofy looking, but hey, whatever. Like, I'm still invested in this character, and, like, let's see what ends up playing out. And then just, like, the repetitiously Omni-Man was just, like, getting on my, like, what's going on with this cat? Like, what's going on with him? Like, I want to know. And then finally we get this big, like, plah onto this episode where we get to know, and then sides are being picked, uh and really it just like this story was epic towards the tail end here, and even it really kind of told us that like they're almost kind of setting up for a season two, the way that this kind of season ends up just kind of just ending, uh to have it be that it seems that the following season is going to go to an even bigger spectrum of things. It seems that Invincible is going to realize that uh, like there is more to this than he originally thought. And so, anyways, so with that said, just a great, just visually a great episode. Like there, like to me, there are very few times where I could say like visually, like this was an amazing episode, and this was one of those. Like this was like the most amazing looking visual episode because there was a lot of difficult stuff going on that I'm like, man, somebody had to draw that. Like, somebody had to frame by frame draw all this stuff, all of this carnage and all this whatever. Even though it's probably like, well, no, it's just off a computer now. And probably a lot of it was adapted from the original comic book. And so, like, I'm sure the visuals might have been a tweed bit easier to figure out and whichever one have you. But, anyways, Robert Kirkman, man, like if Walking Dead wasn't great, like any single story that Robert Kirkman tends to do is just amazing. Even the irredeemable Ant-Man story where we have Ant-Man bizarrely peeping tomming on women in the shower. I don't care. Like Robert Kirkman does good stuff. So yeah, an Ant-Man story that's just very bizarre and hilarious. Go ahead and check it out because it's just odd. But it is what it is. So going on into this, I think it's about that time to go into spoilers about this episode. So I can quickly kind of go through a lot of the stuff that's going on with this episode. Because it feels like a lot, but then also I'm not quite sure if it's a lot. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So in the very beginning of this, we leave off exactly where the last episode had gone off to be. Immediately, we just show this grassy environment, and all of a sudden, you just see like the immortal just falling out of the sky, like his body, like half of his body's in one spot, half of his body's in the other. He's just like dead. So we immediately have Invincible bum rush his father, grabbing at him, pulling at him, just be like, "Oh my god, like, is someone taking control of you? Like, is like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Like, you're not my father," kind of thing. And so, like, because he's very like Invincible's very confused why Omni-Man was fighting the Immortal. Like, it doesn't make sense, and so we end up having Omni-Man just like hold up a minute, like it's me, like let me explain. And so we end up having Invincible just going like, okay, like go ahead, explain. So we end up finding out that Omni-Man has been planning this all along to have taken this planet out. It seems that the Viltrums have a long history of when the Viltrumites are at their planet, they ended up killing every single weak Viltrumite off to only leave the strongest of the Viltrumite within their planet. And so the last survivors of the Viltrumite tended to go to every single planet known to man and basically take them over, wipe them all out. Basically, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 kind of story. Not to like say that was a good or bad thing to this scenario. It's a familiar territory. So I'm like, oh my god, so Omni-Man had this planned all along, and so we end up having Omni-Man telling his son that his mother was a pet to Omni-Man. That Omni-Man's wife to him was a nothing. Just because it was a human being. And we have Mark who is just like, what? And so we have Omni-Man who is like, okay, Mark, now you have to choose sides. Because technically you are you are just like me. You are from the same, like, you have the same abilities as me. You are as Viltrumite as I am. And so now you need to choose to come with me and be able to take down this entire planet of all these weaker animal whatever people, and you need to take them all down. Come with me and let's do that. And Mark is like, so what? So you're going to make me choose between you, who is my father, and this planet? And Ultraman's like, well, yeah, obviously. So Mark is just tears in his eyes, having to choose between his father and this planet. And Mark is just like, no. Like, these are my people. Like, I am here. I am not going to obliterate my entire planet to go back to Viltrumite or whatever, or Viltrum, to meet a bunch of strangers that I've never met before my whole entire life. And so I am going to just have to fight you for this planet. So I'm going to fight you for this planet. And so we end up having Cecil trying to help Mark in a lot of ways, because Mark just isn't, he might be strong, but he just doesn't have the tools or the experience like Omni-Man has. And so, and plus, how much of a percentage of Viltrum, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, does Mark have compared to Omni-Man? Which means technically, like, are their strengths 100, are their everything 100% equal? So we end up having it to where Mark tries to punch his father, and Omni-Man's like, please. Like, come on. And so we end up having Omni-Man, like, punching Mark, and we just end up having this fight out in the sky, which is so fascinating. We just have Omni-Man that is consistently just punching Mark repetitiously in the air, to where he is just consistently getting knocked back so frequently, to where almost the wind is getting knocked out of him. And so we just consistently see Omni-Man just punching Invincible repetitiously to where he's just like consistently getting knocked back and his wind taking out of him and all kinds of things. And we eventually have it to where Cecil uh is is calling out for like, hey, like call the Jets because we're gonna send them out to try to stall Omni-Man to hope that maybe Mark could come up with some kind of strategy or come up with something that could fight off Omni-Man, which I don't think Mark could have come up with anything. Mark is not a person that can strategize, and that is his weakest quality about him is he just goes in there and he thinks that he can just muscle everything. But this time around he is equally matched. And so there is no strategy. He just thinks that he can just punch his way through everything, and that does not work. It doesn't work. So we end up having the Jets firing away at Omni-Man, and Omni-Man is just like, really? Like, like, come on, Cecil. Like, you really trying to pull this? Like, this is just annoying. So we end up having Omni-Man just flying through a jet to where we have the pilot ejecting from this plane. And so we end up seeing that this pilot is like struggling to get his ejector seat to shoot off a parachute. And so Invincible tries to help him and eventually does. And so this pilot ends up having a safe landing onto the ground. And so we end up having Omni-Man just flying down. And he's like, why did you save him? What is the point of, like, he ended up shooting at me. Like, what was the point of him being saved? To where Omni-Man just takes this guy's skull and busts it right in front of Invincible. And I'm like, oh my god. This is Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat. Blah, 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 blah. Busting skulls. Blah, blah. So, Omni-Man is just covered with blood in this freaking episode. Because we end up having Omni-Man saying, like, what is the point of any of this species living? These are all savages. These are all, like, what is the point of these things living on? And so we end up having Omni-Man trying to prove to Mark that the fatality of all these people does not matter, and Mark needs to see every little bit of carnage to understand. And so we have Omni-Man taking Invincible and taking him through a subway. Literally through a subway. So we have Omni-Man taking Mark into a subway station and just having Mark being pushed through a subway to where we just see the carnage of this subway train and all of these bodies and everything that Mark is smacking into, all of these bodies, this carnage, this everything, to see this annihilation and to just see this onslaught of all these bodies in the wake that had been torn apart by Mark basically going through all of them. And like, this was the most amazing looking visual. I was so impressed by this. And Omni-Man is consistently trying to prove a point to Mark that it's like, what is the point of all this? What is the point of any of these people surviving? There is no point. Kill them all off. Who cares? Because we end up finding out that Omni-Man lives for seemingly thousands upon thousands of years. And so the existence of this species does not matter. All the people that that Mark has loved and will eventually in the future lose, because eventually he will have outaged everybody. He will outlive everyone. And so that is the most crucial thing that Omni-Man is telling Mark, that he is going to he's going to outlive everyone that he knows. So what is the point of him clinging on to a planet that he won't remember after X amount of time? Which I thought that was the most fascinating. Like, man, no one has ever used that before, especially when you have characters that are basically immortal, that will live forever. That really, what is the point of clinging on to a thing that isn't going to last? So we end up having Mark coming from off of this subway, and we end up finding out that there is a building that is seemingly going to topple over. And so Mark ends up flying up to try to push this building, or to keep this building up. And we end up having the Guardians of the Globe all watching on. And we end up having Adam and Eve coming to greet the Guardians of the Globe, and we have them just watching on as Invincible is trying to like save these people. And so we end up having it to where Mark is desperately trying to save this young girl and this mother. While this building is falling off, we end up having Mark grabbing onto the woman's arm as she fell out of the window, and we have the young girl watching on. And so we end up having Mark just like telling like the woman, it's like, hold on, we're gonna, like, I'm gonna try, like, I'm trying. To where eventually this building is just too great for Mark to try to put back from where once it was. And so the whole entire building just falls onto Mark, and this entire building is destroyed. Mark eventually goes to toss off to the side of the rubble, and he is holding onto a hand, and we're like, oh, great, so he saved the... No. Mark is holding on to the hand of the woman that he tried to save, but there is nothing else there but this arm, telling us that this woman had died amidst this rubble, which was sad. So, because the Guardians of the Globe ended up seeing that, we end up having Black Samson telling the whole entire team, okay, well, like, we need to go out there and we need to go and help save these people that were in that rubble, and we need to help people. And we have it to where, like, Robot is mentioning, well, yeah, but Cecil said that we needed to stay here, and Black Samson is like, I don't care what he said. I don't give a lick about anything that guy has said. Like, we need to go out there and we need to help out now. And that's all that I'm going... Like, we have to where Black Samson, I think, is becoming the leader of the Guardians of the Globe, because he's like the veteran character and so on and so forth. And so he's basically telling people what to do. And Robot is just there, I guess. So, because I would have assessed that Robot was actually the leader of this, but I guess just Black Samson is just like, dude, I'm taking that role. I don't care what anybody else has to say about it. So they go out, and we have all the team going and like fixing up this rubble. And so we end up having Omni-Man convincing Mark that nothing on Earth is going to matter And we end up having Omni-Man telling us that Deborah did not matter to him. And we end up having Cecil and Deborah watching on, seeing this feed and hearing every single thing that Omni-Man is saying. All of the hurtful things that he is saying, Deborah is hearing it, and he's like, and she's crying. She's like, how could a man that I thought I loved, how could he just have, like, tricked me this whole time? How could he have lied to me this much? Like, how could he have just, like, really, the one person that I've been with so long, that I've loved and I've everything, just, how could he have betrayed me this much? To where eventually we just have this really just heartbreaking moment eventually later on in this episode. So we end up having Omni-Man just trying to punch Mark to oblivion. Just repetitiously just punching Mark. I guess till Omni-Man was thinking that he could just punch Mark until Mark would just turn into nothing. We consistently have Omni-Man trying to still convince Mark, but it's just, we end up having Omni-Man saying, like, what is going to keep you here? What is going to make this planet so important after everyone is gone? And Mark throws at Omni-Man, it's like, well, you Dad, you'll be here. And it's like, oh my God, that felt so, like, just the heart part of, yeah, I was like, yeah, he's right, because he'll always have his father, no matter how old Omni-Man will get. Like, yeah, like, Mark will still always have his father. Like, Mark is so, like, family and friends, and yeah, like, just that was just so heart-wrenching. So we have it to where Omni-Man is remembering some baseball game that that Mark was playing when he was young, to where he didn't have any powers. And I think this whole entire thing triggered when Mark was to have superpowers. That's the reason why Omni-Man decided, okay, my son has superpowers, well, it's time to now annihilate this world. If, like, Omni-Man was just trying to find his next heir or a next person that was going to be as powerful as him, to where he can have help to annihilate this planet. So we end up having Omni-Man at this baseball game, I mean. And so Omni-Man is talking to Deborah, and Omni-Man is mentioning how, like, a waste of time it is to, like, watch this game and how pointless it is. And that Omni-Man is like, well, like, if anything, the best angle and way to watch the baseball game is actually up from the sky rather than where I'm actually at. Because Deborah is like, well, why are you even standing here? It makes no sense. And Omni-Man is just like, well, it's the best way to watch the game. So we end up having Mark seemingly hit the ball, and eventually he ends up like doing really well, to the point of him eventually getting home and scoring, I guess, the winning run of the baseball game. And so we have it to where both Omni-Man and Deborah are just cheering on their son. They're like, yeah, like, he did it. Like, yeah, he scored a point. Yeah, like, he did it. And so we end up having Omni-Man and Mark having this moment together after Mark scored, because he's like, did you see, Dad? Like, I did it. Did you see it? And Omni-Man's like, yes, son, you did. And it's like, oh my God, just pull out those heartstrings some more. And so we end up having Omni-Man who's punching his son, and we end up having Mark throwing in that whole thing of like, well, like, after everything is gone, I'll still have you, Dad. And we end up having Omni-Man just like just stopping dead in his tracks, and he ends up just flying off because he just like he couldn't reason with his son. He couldn't have his son do what he wanted, and we just have it to where Omni-Man is just seeing things his way and no one else. Mark, I think, was really like Mark was just kind of two ways about this, because I think Mark is more like his mother, which that's what made him chose what side he's on. But also, when looking at it, I think Mark has Omni-Man's like personality, I think, or like we have it to where, yeah, like Mark is like his mother, but like there's stuff that also kind of feels like Omni-Man as well. Like the stubbornness and just the like really seeing how like you can kind of see like some things in Mark from Omni-Man and so on and so forth. So we end up having Invincible flying off, and so now we have Mark who is to be taken by the stealth Cecil ambulance people, and so they take him and they put him in the hospital, and we end up having Cecil having to tell Deborah, it's like, well, I didn't know how to exactly say this, but we are going to say that Omni-Man had died in some explosion. And we are going to give him a funeral, and we're going to give him a gravestone and all kinds of things. Like, we're just going to have to say that he's dead. And Deborah had to hear this news. Her son's in the hospital. Her husband is an alien to her now. And so we end up having them, like all this stuff is all hitting them at once, to where we end up having Invincible, like, really just not, like, when he does even awaken within the hospital, like, he can't look at anybody. He can't look at anybody the right way because he just feels, I think, like an outcast, like an alien, much more so now than he ever was. And so we end up having it to where both both Mark and Deborah make their way home to where Mark is now just going and like trying to get back to normal. It's like, well, hey, Mom, how about we get a thing of pizza? And so like Mark goes and tries to like find his mom in the house to like ask her like what they're gonna do for dinner. And we just end up seeing like Deborah like in her room just crying about Omni-Man, and Mark is like, okay, I'll just back away because I'll just give her space. So we end up having it to where eventually, since basically every one of Mark's friends knows that Mark is invincible, we end up having it to where Adam Eve basically mentions to William and Amber, I think, Mark's girlfriend, that she's Adam Eve, and they don't even know who she is. Like, who are you? Are you Duplicate? And she's like, no, I'm the pink one. And they're like, because we end up having Mark getting a phone call, which has him go off to meet up with Cecil. And so Cecil is like, hey man, like I know this has been really hard on you and I get it. Like I can understand like you need to take your time and like heal your wounds kind of thing. And so like we end up having Cecil taking Mark to this environment that seemingly can't really be seen by the human eye. And we have Cecil who ends up showcasing to Mark this environment, and we ended up having Mark saying like, "Wow, like this is like crazy. This is amazing looking." And we have to where Cecil's like, "Well, yeah, but uh, like we really have tried to hide this from all kind of normal people just because like we really want to keep our secrecy and our privacy and whatever." And so Cecil kind of uses this room, this in place, this environment to ask Mark, well, hey, like, would you like to be a part of the Guardians of the Globe? Would you like to be part of us? And Mark is like, yeah, I don't know. Like, give me time. Like, I really like suffered like a pretty big blow. And so like I just really need time right now. And so we end up having Cecil saying like, okay, well that's fine and everything. Like go ahead and take as much time as you want. And so eventually we end up having Mark eventually again getting another phone call to have him say, well, hey, like I get it that you're not like a part of us, but like we need you. Like we need you to go and fly out into Earth's atmosphere because it seems like some thing is flying into the Earth's atmosphere to maybe attack us, maybe to be an ally. We don't know, and so we end up having Invincible just saying, "Well, okay, sure, like it's the right thing to do, and maybe it's my dad." So we end up having Invincible flying out, and I guess like here's the trickery moment of us thinking that maybe it's going to be Omni Man, but it's not. It ends up being Alan the alien, and we end up finding that Alan the alien kind of knew all along that Omni Man's home planet was going to take down Earth, and so we end up having Alan kind of mentioning to Invincible, hey man, like, it seems that this planet has really been a threat to all life and civilizations, and so we're kind of really putting together some kind of front to take this planet down. Like, are you game? Like, are you, like, do you want to be a part of this alliance? And so Invincible's like, well, yeah, I guess, but I just didn't realize how big of a scope that this really was. And it kind of is giving Invincible like a lot of hope. And also, it really is making Invincible think that there is like something to like strive for again. That we end up having Invincible saying it's like, well, hey man, like I guess there's a real reason for me to go on and do things like finish up school and stuff along those lines. And Alan was like, yeah, sure, I guess. Alan the alien, the guy that we end up having Invincible meet in the early episodes, which I don't know if I mentioned that or not. So really, that's just how this episode just ends, with just that moment there. So I think I want to get out of here because I don't remember how long that this episode was. So with that said, a really good episode. I really enjoyed it, but also I kind of wanted to rush through this as quickly as possible too. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.